Wow. Welcome. Welcome to those who have come from away. And there's some folks here who came from very far away because Bob was so special to them. Welcome to those of you who are from here, who have been here for as long as you've been here. And welcome to those of you joining us by Zoom today. We have over 50 people joining us from all around the world on Zoom. It feels so fitting that we gather here at Gould Farm to celebrate the life of Bob Rausch. Bob, who spent 45 years here, nearly half a century of dedication and presence and care. Each of us has been touched by Bob's kindness, his curiosity, his humor, and his deep respect for both people and the natural world around us. The wilderness visionary Benton Mackay, founder of the Appalachian Trail, used to visit Monterey in the 1920s and 30s. He spent a lot of time here at Gould Farm, and he came to see Gould Farm as a place of healing, and he called it a school in the art of living. For almost 50 years, Bob carried that same vision forward, tending these woods, caring for the land, and working alongside guests and volunteers and staff with patience and purpose. Anna Van Sickle wrote recently in the Berkshire Edge a few years ago and described Bob as a master of forest-mindedness. Come spring, she said, you could always find him in the sugar bush, gathering nature's liquid gold. And in truth, Bob himself was pure gold. A steady, shining presence whose warmth and wisdom sweetened the lives of everyone who knew him. Aren't we so fortunate? Bob was a naturalist in every sense, not just of the forest, but of the spirit, and his presence is woven into this place in the trees, into the trails, the stone walls, the sap buckets, the newly named Bob Rausch Library, which is right around the corner in this building, which I hope you'll visit, and along Diane's Trail, honoring his late wife. In his later years, even as he faced cancer and its toll, Bob reminded us that it's not the weight we carry that defines us, but how we carry it, by sharing it with others, by lifting each other up, even when we ourselves feel tired. All of us gathered here today from so many parts of Bob's life are reflections of that same art of living he modeled so beautifully in his life. May our time together today and in the days ahead honor Bob's memory by caring for one another, by caring for this land, and by carrying forward his kindness, compassion, and love into this beautiful and broken world. During our time together today, we'll also invite you to come forward and to share your own remembrances, stories of how Bob touched you in your life. We'll have a time for our friends on Zoom to do the same. And following our service today, we hope you'll stay and join us for refreshments and fellowship as we continue to celebrate and give thanks for Bob's life and legacy. Welcome.
So good to be here. I met Bob in 1979, a long time ago, but he'd already been here. We'll begin today by lighting the candle. We light this candle, flame of remembrance, with these words from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us, Schweitzer wrote, has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. We here, gathered in mourning for Bob Robert Rausch, indeed have cause to think with deep gratitude about those flames that he helped kindle within each of us. O Spirit of life, O source of love, gather us as one community, united by this difficult loss and bound by the amazing blessings granted to all by Bob's life of hope and wonder. Help us to remember, to honor, and to celebrate that supersized spirit of Bob Rausch. And may we be blessings to each other as we mourn and share our memories. Please let us take a time of silence. So do bow your heads and still your minds. And in the quiet, as we share a meditation time, let us fill our hearts with the spirit that embodied Bob Rausch. Let us be silent. Blessed be. And I welcome Steve Snyder to read something which Bob actually wrote some years back.
Wow, what an amazing gathering. And it's because of Bob. I look around so many different memories and love for so many people here and realize we're all here because of Bob. And he loved life, and perhaps more than anyone in my experience, he's demonstrated how to walk with life gently. So from the writing of Bob's titled Affirming Life. The affirmation of organic life necessitates a revision of purely mechanical worldview, which is too often present not only in biology, but also in sociology and politics. Let us begin at the level of human consciousness, of purposes and meanings, even of those that go beyond ourselves into the future. Then we are at the center of the universe, looking outward, imbuing the very starry sky with meaning because of our existence. These rich reflections, promptings, and dreams encourage our further development. We know that we have already transcended ourselves and have gone beyond the mix of chemicals that make us up. And though seemingly tiny in a vast sea of space and matter, we are nonetheless at the center. Life and consciousness thus become sacred, and our deepest selves can now work toward unknown and unknowable possibilities. Did you all hear the beginning of that well enough?
Okay, so we're going to sing the river song that you all have in your programs. And I don't need to be less nervous if you all sing. However, there is one, on the third verse, I was looking it over, and it said, the rolling waters will round the bend and flow. I said, no, I don't know it like that. It's the rolling waters will round me bend, so I'm going to sing it like that. So ignore the and the go and sing round me bend. I was born in the valley of winter wind, praising the mountains are old. Springtime waters came dancing down. I remember the tales they told. The whistling waves of my younger days too quickly have faded on by, and all the memories
Thank you, Orrin. That was really beautiful. The river of Bob's life ran strong and steady through Gould Farm, and his waters cut a deep and true channel here like few others. Bob's Gould Farm legacy spanned 6 decades, over 40% of the farm's 112-year-old history. During that time, he positively impacted the lives of many, many people, including, I dare say, all of you gathered here today. The eulogizing of Bob's life should not be relegated to any one or two of us. We all have our own thoughts and remembrances of Bob, and I therefore encourage you to come forward later in the service if you are moved to share them. I only ask that you keep your remarks reasonably brief to allow others the same opportunity. The advice that I'm afraid I may have myself ignored. There will also be time after the service to share stories in smaller groups. Please do. My hope is that all of us will come away today learning at least one new thing about Bob. On this very October day, in 1899, Rosalie Butler conveyed the lands of Monument Mountain to the trustees of the reservation. We know this because it is literally carved in stone near the top of the mountain. Over the years, Bob and I climbed that mountain together maybe a half dozen times. And we'd always stop at that stone to read the inscription. I think it's especially fitting that we are gathered here today to celebrate Bob's life on the anniversary of that conveyance. In 1850, Melville, Hawthorne, and Bryant famously hiked Monument Mountain and were forced to seek shelter in a cave due to a thunderstorm. Had Bob accompanied them, he probably would have advised against the hike that day due to the likelihood of severe weather, but then maybe Moby Dick may not have been written. It's actually not too hard to imagine Bob sauntering and conversing with those luminaries or any of the other writers of that period, including Henry David Thoreau, whom we often reference. Bob had 19th century proclivities, as anyone who ever observed him jotting down something in his thick black notebook or ever received a handwritten letter from him could attest. Not surprisingly, the person most often credited with reviving American transcendentalism in the 20th century was none other than Lewis Mumford, the humanist philosopher and urban planner whose writings resonated so profoundly with Bob and with whom Bob maintained a lengthy correspondence and even visited on several occasions. If you wanted to animate Bob, just mention Lewis Mumford. Even if you didn't, he eventually would, provided you waited long enough. I first met Bob in 1979 when Kathy and I came to Gould Farm for what we thought would just be the summer. That plan worked out for us about as well as it did for Virgil and Liz Stucker, and probably many others of you here today. Gould Farm has a way of doing that to people. But when Bob came to the farm in 1978, he was already on a trajectory that would combine his reverence for nature, his commitment to serve and teach others, and his yearning to live in community. While Mumford wrote volumes warning of the dehumanization of effects of unchecked mechanization, Bob, like Thoreau before him when he set out for Walden Pond, chose a distinctly humanizing path for his own life. But unlike Thoreau, Bob never veered from that path. Bob had been gravitating toward Gould Farm ever since he was discharged from the Army in 1971, even though he may have only realized it in retrospect. So it should come as no surprise that once Bob found Gould Farm, this special place, he would remain here for the rest of his life. He was home. And when someone finds their home, their true home, whatever they do in that home and for that home is an act of love. For Bob, Gould Farm was never simply a job. It was always a reaffirming act of love. That is why, in addition to his daily routine of work leader in the gardens and grounds, the department he eventually headed up for some 30 years, Bob came to nearly every meal, gave the weather report every morning, fed the barn cats every day, led hikes and nature walks every Sunday, pitched for both sides of the softball game every Tuesday, drove church trips and other outings every week, put in dozens of extra hours every sap season, participated in or attended every Gould Farm event, sat through every community meeting. It gets worse. Every associates meeting, every board meeting. And over his 46-year tenure at Gould Farm, undertook countless tasks and projects, both large and small, to improve this place, this community that he loved so dearly. And it was all done with the gentleness and compassion that was woven into the very fabric of his being. To say Bob was heavily invested in Gould Farm would be a monumental understatement. Bob's favorite time of year was the sugaring season, the start of which often coincided with his birthday in early February. He used to say that sugaring was the perfect Gould Farm activity. It lasted a long time, involved many separate tasks, required many hands, and you ended up with sweet syrup to pour over your pancakes for the remainder of the year. Bob probably tapped every sugar maple on Gould Farm, and maybe a few other trees, and perhaps even a telephone pole or two. I used to collect sap with Bob on the weekends when the buckets were brimming and the helpers were scarce. Bob and I became fast friends during that summer of 1979, Even though he was in his early 30s, Bob reminded me and even looked a bit like my grandfather. A sweet man who I adored growing up. I remember the nature walks with Bob and Will McIntosh led most Sunday afternoons following the dinner meal, which was a formal sit-down affair back then. Bob had only been at Gould Farm for a year or so, but he seemed to intimately know each and every woodland trail that crisscrossed the farm's 600-acre property, its history, its geology, and the flora that grew alongside it. Bob could walk a lot faster those days, but he often chose not to, taking time to really observe and inform. He was a natural teacher. Kathy and I returned to the farm in the mid-80s with 2 young children and 1 on the way. In the intervening years, Bob had met Diane, and they were married in 1983. But tragically, Diane became sick, and she eventually passed away from cancer in 1992. Bob was devastated, but gradually an idea took hold in him and others to build a foot trail in her memory. And thus, with the help of many Gould farmers, current and former, Diane's Trail was created. A 1.5-mile loop trail that traverses both wetland and woodland habitats on the northern edge of the Gould Farm property. A large footbridge was constructed over Rausch Brook just east of where it flows into the Contopot River, and numerous walkways and bog bridges were built to navigate the ever-shifting banks of Rausch Brook. Some 40 stations of interest mark the trail, and local naturalist Bonner McAllister designed an accompanying self-guided brochure. It opened to the public in 1995 and has become one of those hidden gems of the Berkshires. Over the years, Bob and I spent many hundreds of hours together working on and maintaining Diane's Trail, as it required a lot more maintenance than the other trails on the farm. We also spent a good deal of time helping one another maintain our respective sections of the Appalachian Trail. We'd often enjoy a beer together after an afternoon of trail work, and invariably, we'd end up talking about Lewis Mumford. Or he would. Bob could be very funny, as many of you know. His humor was dry and sudden and never at anyone's expense. But he had a tell. If his massive eyebrows scouted handsome, you knew the joke was on the way. In 2004, Bob began dating Barbara Swan, the then clerk of Monterey. At first, I thought it was a brilliant move to fast-track the permitting process. Did you see my eyebrows? Actually, Bob and Barbara fell in love, and Bob eventually sold his house on Dubai Woods Circle and moved in with Barbara on Wallace Road. They became absolutely devoted to one another as the patterns of their life together gradually took shape. Barbara told me recently that she can still hear his voice reminding her to turn off the stove, pick up the mail, or call such and such a doctor. So can I, actually. Barbara was alone with Bob the evening of September 5th when he quietly passed away. But in the weeks and months before he died, a parade of visitors descended on that stone house on Wallace Road. So many that Bob's calendar was barely large enough to keep track of them all. Friends came with food, they came to mow, to stack wood, to bring in bags of pellets, but mostly they came just to visit. Bob and Barbara graciously invited them all in, despite the discomfort and indignities Bob was experiencing as the cancer progressed. He especially enjoyed the company of his 3 longtime bachelor friends, Orrin, Steve, and Dan, with whom he shared enough memories to topple a kayak, but that's another story. In early August, Bob and I took a little trip to Gilder Pond in Mount Everett State Forest. He was very frail. Every pothole we hit driving up that dirt road They can wince from pain. Excuse me. The bloom of the mountain laurel had long passed, but it was a lovely summer day. I brought a couple of folding chairs and a couple of beers. And we sat there for a while just watching the pond. Excuse me. It occurred to me that like the Mount Laurel blooms, my dear friend would soon pass from this earth. Sorry. It also occurred to me how brave Bob was in the face of death. And I wondered how he managed that. Then, after Bob died, I found this little index card in his wallet. He had a lot of other things in his wallet. This index card that might provide a clue. It said, where there is weakness, strength; where there is fear, courage; and where there is despair, hope. Bob's life exemplified strength, courage, and hope, along with commitment and compassion. Can any of us imagine a richer legacy? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Bob's beloved sister Carol is joining us by Zoom and wasn't able to be with us in person, but she sent some remembrances to share with all of us gathered today. Dear Bob, it doesn't seem possible that 6 weeks have passed since you left us. I am missing you so much. Thinking back to our early years when we moved to Cumberland, I recall special memories of our picnics in the backyard under your favorite maple tree that still stands tall, and the games that we played together. I recall our fishing trips with Dad and how we would get excited when we caught a fish. Also coming to mind is your love for the old red wagon that you took such good care of, and the scooter Mr. McGill gave you that brought you so much joy. These are now treasured memories for me. Later, when you attended URI, visiting you with fried chicken and salad was a special meal after eating campus food all week. And seeing Lan and Junko on these visits was so much fun. Through the years that followed, we kept in touch with notes, phone calls, and special visits. In 1978, you found Gould Farm, which turned out to be your life's work. I could feel your happiness at having found a place that you could call home. I believe God led you there, and at Gould Farm you touched so many lives positively. A story that illustrates your compassionate nature is the day we were driving home from Oak Hill after visiting with Mother. We noticed a baby bird in the center of the road, and we looked at each other, and without a word, you turned the car around, ran up to the bird, scooped it up in your cap, and placed it on a tree branch. I remember the light in your eyes when we saw a parent come to rescue it. I was so proud of you, and I never forgot that moment. I will cherish our talks over the years, especially during your final days. You were the light in my life in a sometimes confusing world. You were always a beacon of hope to everyone your life touched, and you were brave and courageous in facing your final days. Though my grief is deep, I feel so blessed to have had you for my brother. I will carry you in my heart for the rest of my days, Bob. When I look at a tree, a flower, or the sun rising and setting, I will see you. Frequently, when we ended our chats, you would say, "So long for now, Carol." Well, so long for now, Bob. I hope you have found sweet peace and rest. Miss you. Love, your sister, Carol. can see Carol on the screen, but maybe Carol can wave and give us a hello along the way, maybe when we get to the Zoom time in a moment. Oh, okay. At this time, we'd like to open up for a time of remembrances among all of us gathered here. So, as John so delicately said, please keep it brief if you can. I think the easiest way is if you want to come up and use these seats to sit and wait for a turn, we invite you to come up to the microphone so that the folks on Zoom can hear when you make some remarks. So if you want to come on up, start coming on up and grab a seat, and you can wait for when the mic is open and speak into the mic so everybody can hear you. Who'd like to go first? I see Deb coming up. You want to go first, Deb?
Bob Rausch is here among us all, listening intently as we say our goodbyes. Our souls lives on as such as he has, as he continues his legacy, working the land through our hard work. He wants nothing but our happiness too. He is a whole person now that he has risen. I have known Bob for many years. He has touched many people's lives. I wish Bob the best, as he much deserves it. He has been so dedicated to taking very good care of the land of Gould Farm and nurturing guests' lives. For example, when our work team walked the many trails Bob groomed. We missed you, Bob, when our chorus group came to the farm to sing. And I know you would have been at the performance if possible. Bless you, Bob Rausch. You will be surely missed, but now your body is made whole and you can rest now. Amen.
Hi, my name is Virgil. I was thinking about three things. First of all, when I think of Bob, word kindness comes to mind. Think about that little bird that his sister talked about putting up on the branch. I don't know that I ever witnessed any situation in which Bob ruffled anyone's feathers. He was always trying to help people get up on that branch. I was also thinking about patience. I don't know how many of you ever had the opportunity to follow him as he was driving a car. Being someone who generally drives 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, I learned to grasp the concept of patience following someone who drove 10 miles under the speed limit. And then I think also about staying the course. Not only all of the years at Gould Farm, but staying the course through troubled and frightening times. I see that Ina Kadries is on the call here from Holland. And I remember a time, and she can correct me if I get any of this story wrong, but they're in New York City and they're at Central Park, and of course Bob wants to take a hike. Right through the woods, and it's getting dark. Not on the trails. Some of us, as we go through whatever woods we go through, we might be thinking about all the fearful things, but he says, oh, it was okay. I had my compass. So with that, I hope we can grab a compass when we need one to see ourselves through that straightforward approach we need to take when things get frightening, and slow down 10 miles below the speed limit every once in a while and think about patience. Thank you, Bob.
Just quickly, Virgil's story about how slow Bob drove. This is a true story. I was in the car with Bob. We were going to dinner at the Hillsdale House, which for Bob was like traveling to Europe. But I was so proud I got him to do it. And as I was driving on Turingham Road, Bob said, You can go a little faster, Arn. I was like, nobody believes that, but it's a true story. So that was it. The only other thing I want to say is, as I look and see everybody here, some people who I've known haven't seen for a long time. That is what Bob really was the humanity of Gould Farm. He was it, and that is what makes Gould Farm great. Bob was it. That's it. Thank
you. Edna St. Vincent Millay, a poet, said, "O world, I cannot hold thee close enough." Someone said that to me as we walked in, and I thought, that was Bob. He held the world close in his heart. And all of us here are holding Bob close in our hearts. And Bob would say to us, hold one another. Where there is in the world separation and tragedy and frazzled edges, hold each other close. I do that with each of you today. I'm thankful for his influence in my life.
Hello, my name is Isaac Kopechny.
Believe it or not, you need just a little light.
Thanks. My name is Isaac, and my father's name is Phil. And I was fortunate enough to grow up at Gould Farm and spend a lot of time with Bob. And it's so nice to see everyone here. It's so very nice to see everyone here. To celebrate the graduation of life of a man where there are no words powerful enough to capture his magnificence. Each person brings a side out of us that no one else can. And some people say that when someone dies, a part of you dies along with them because they're no longer here to bring that side out of you. And that's why it's so important to be present, to be grateful, and to treat ourselves and our bodies with respect and love so that we are capable of loving the people that love us. Bob wasn't just a pillar of this community, at least to me, and I think to a lot of us, he was the foundation. And there are other people in that category as well. And I feel that I'm feeling grateful, and I'm just thankful to be here with you all, and want to thank Bob for existing and being so kind to me. And that's about it right now.
That was really beautiful. I remember when he was a lot shorter. My name is Brian. I had the honor of attempting to supervised Bob for about a decade. I learned so much more from him than I could ever have taught him. And so many times since I left here in 2001, have I remembered back the lessons that I remembered from Bob. There's some very practical things I wanted to mention that might not make it into other people's statements. He loved every tree on this property. Okay, can we all agree on that? Yes. Every single tree. However, he took care of this forest, and part of taking care of it was to do planned harvests. And they were not always popular to do planned harvests. And it hurt him to do so. But there were years, more than just a couple, when the difference between a big loss on the budget here and breaking even was those planned harvests. It helped to bring Gould Farm through some very tough years. And Bob shepherded that process through his very careful management of the forest. 1995, John mentioned it. Something else happened that year. Memorial Day, 1995, we lost a lot of trees. I think we estimated that about 100 acres was down at the end of the tornado. Talk about how Bob would feel that. Nonetheless, and of course we had a huge team effort here. Everybody pitched in over the next really 3 years. It took, I would say, 3 years to fully recover. But over the next year, which was the most important, we had to do something with all those trees. And we had people drive on the property that, handed trees and told us, well, those trees are worthless, but we'll take them all and get them, clear them up and get them out of here for you if you want. But Bob helped to advise me through that process. We sold, I estimated, at least 24 semi-loads of logs and kept that many, which we sawed into lumber. And that process produced enough cash and enough lumber that you can still see the renaissance that started across this farm and is even continuing today with the work that this building and other things. I mean, it was very difficult to change anything. But Bob helped to shepherd that process as well through a very tough time. But the one that sticks with me the most was the time that Bob made an appointment to meet with me. Now, Bob did not normally make appointments to meet me. He would just come in, he would catch me at lunch or dinner, he would, at tea time, he'd pull me aside. He made an appointment, and he came in and sat down in the office, and he was kind of somber, and I thought, oh my gosh, what is this about? Bob said, I think it's time to take the main house maple down. And I could swear he was just announcing that he had witnessed a death or he was about to. And I'm like, Bob, you want me to be the executive director that took down the main house maple? Really? But he made such a clear case about the safety of the maple and the care of the environs around main house that I knew we had to do it. And there were board members really opposed. It was a difficult process. But it came down, and I will always remember how I felt when you walked out of the office after that meeting. And I still feel it today. It felt like Will Gould came in and told me the tree had to come down. I think we're all Will Gould sometimes. I think that spirit passes among us. And I think now, be Bob's spirit that passes among us. Thanks so much, everyone.
first met Bob in January of 1992, my first day here, which also happened to be the memorial service for Diane. And I remember that was the first time I ever heard the song, the River Song by Bill Steen. So it was very poignant to sing it today for Bob. But what I wanted to talk about was Bob's relationship with children. And I was lucky enough to share my children with Bob. And we, between, I think it was 1994 and about 2000, nearly every night at the fireside table with Bob and Roma and Harriet and Jonah, my son, who was an infant, so there now, he just turned 31. My husband Bob, and it was a special delight every night when we sat down at the table and Bob Rausch would turn to my Bob Carlson, and say, "Hi, Bob." And Bob Carlson would turn to him and say, "Hi, Bob." And usually anyone else at the table was giggling at that point. It was very cute. But yeah, Bob was just so compassionate, so kind, and always so curious about the kids and what they were up to. And even in the last few days of his life, when I would call, he would say, "How's Jonah? How's Ella?" And he remembered where they were living and what they were up to, what they had studied in college. It was just so special. So most of my memories are just kindness, compassion, curiosity. But during this last few weeks, I've been racking my brains trying to think of, did I ever see Bob Rausch upset or irritated or grumpy? And I couldn't think of anything. And then Amy Gould Farm, all of a sudden, don't touch me, I just remembered the green beans. The green beans. Anybody else remember green beans from the garden during the 90s? Yes? Okay. I'm just going to leave it there. There were, Steve Snyder remembers, yeah, there were a lot of green beans. So many green beans. And I was working in the kitchen at that time with Amy and Alex and many others. And there were just crates coming in of green beans. And so many of them were really challenging to cook. That was just a little humor, but honestly, that's the only thing I could come up with. After 33 years of knowing Bob and bearing witness to his kindness.
Normally I'd be the last person to be up here, but for Bob, I'm willing to do it. I worked together with Bob on what we used to call F&G, Forestry and Grounds, for almost 20 years. And for most of those years, all the new guests at the farm started off on the F&G team. And that was perfect because of Bob's nature. It was mentioned how slow he drove. He was never in a hurry. And not only when he was driving forward, he was an expert in driving in reverse. He would go out of his way to drive in reverse. We'd be down at the bridge at the Crossing Brook, and he would back all the way up the hill to Gould Road. There were a lot of places he could have turned around, but he just loved to back up. But he was great for the new guests. So, like everybody else said, the kindness, the patience, they felt so relaxed being with him. It was such a gentle introduction to Gould Farm. And he, like everybody said, he had a lot of funny things he'd say. A couple of them I can remember. Whenever we'd have a load of branches, he'd say, "We can take these down and make a branch office." And maybe the best one that we liked the best, I think he's found an old abandoned vacuum cleaner out in the woods, all beat up. And Bob said, nature abhors a vacuum. And he was always, the other thing about Bob is, like if there was snow to shovel on the weekend, or before the work team started, he was always the one out there shoveling the walkways. He just went the extra yard, always. Thank you.
I would like to say that I met Bob about 60 years ago. We met in Kansas City, Missouri. At that time, Bob and I had both joined what is called VISTA, Volunteers in Service of America. And that's what, we were there for training in Kansas City. And then we were finally sent to different towns in Missouri to be in. Bob went to a town called Butler, very tiny town, almost on the border with Kansas. And I was in Clinton, which was a little larger town, but everything was small. I shared an apartment with another fellow who was in Vista, and we had an extra bedroom, and on some weekends Bob would come over and use the bedroom, and we would walk around the town, just chat. No drinking, nothing, it was just, friendly times of being together and enjoying ourselves. And talking about the various things that we did with the people that we were working with. And so over the years, Bob and I have always stayed together. I've enjoyed listening to all of you get up here and speak about him. It has meant an awful lot in my life. And I certainly knew Diane, and I had been to the home that they had many times over the years. And it was sad that she passed. And Barbara came along into his life even stronger. And that has been a wonderful relationship with the two of them. And they've done so much together. And they've shared so much. And I didn't realize how bad his health was. I've been talking to him on the phone, and you just didn't know. I know Barbara would tell me a few things, Heather and Jan, but it was difficult being away from the area to know exactly what was happening. And I'm very happy that I was invited to come here today and to meet with all of you who've also shared many wonderful things with Bob over the years. He's been a special person in my life, and I'm sorry to see him have gone. I'm 81, and I'm sure that my time is getting to the end too. But we just keep living our lives day for day and enjoy as much as we can. And I thank you all. And I thank Bob so much.
Hello, my name is Sam. I came to the farm. I've been part of the farm family for my entire life, but to come to the farm about 15 years ago. I started as a volunteer, and to be working under Bob at that time. A lot of people have mentioned so much about him, and my experience of that was aligned so much. I just wanted to highlight a few things that Bob taught me. The first was just this trust. I started as a volunteer, and a couple months in, one day, I broke the F&G truck. And then the next day, I broke the farm truck. I might not have been the one responsible for breaking them, but I was using them when they broke, so I'll take responsibility, really. And then the next day, Bob handed me a set of keys for one of the maintenance trucks and still trusted me to continue to do the work that I was meant to be doing. And in the same way that he was doing that with me as a volunteer, to experience that with everybody with whom we were working. To know that no matter where we were coming at, no matter how many times we broke that truck, no matter how many times we broke our equipment, that they're still being trusted to continue to do the work that was in front of us. And as Bob slowed down, and John, you mentioned how sometimes going on those hikes, it took longer and longer as we went along, to still have that sense of Bob starting to be training the next generation into the role of what was necessary to be caring for the land here, but to be using that as really a proxy of how we're caring for each other. Bob introduced me to the works of Aldo Leopold and Louis Mumford, and how influential those were for helping me understand, again, as we are caring for the land, that we're not caring for the land because we're caring just for it, but because we're caring for ourselves as a community, and how the land supports us and how we support it. The final thing I wanted to really highlight, Bob's story about the best cup of coffee that he ever had. I don't remember the exact details of the hike, Steve, you might have to help me out on it, but just remembering and telling the story of him coming up, and it's before dawn, and watching the sunrise and having a cup of instant coffee, and it was the best cup of coffee that he ever had. And to know in those moments of letting go of those material things, and to just find the joy in the moment, in the people with whom we are with. Bob helped me grow, helped me to become who I am today, and it shaped the decisions on how I view others and how I view the land. And I can only hope that I will continue to maintain that legacy that he has tried to pass to all of us.
Hi, my name is Bill. Bob was one of the first people I met at Gould Farm, like I'm sure he was for many, many generations of Gould farmers, just because he was so easy to talk to about the weather. But where I connected with him was on my days off, I would wander the trails, and very soon I conquered all the trails on the farm, so I'd venture off and find things like places where sap buckets were left a decade ago, just rusting partially left on the trees. So I'd mention that to Bob, and he would say, "Oh yeah, we're over there by 100 yards off of whatever trail." He knew these woods so well. But, one of my fondest times with Bob was I invited him for a trip up to the Allagash Wilderness Waterway, a week-long canoe trip, and I was very surprised when he said yes. So this is a lot of fun, 24/7 with Bob for a week, and we were with one other Gould farmer, Steve, I'm not sure if Steve's here, but there were also people that didn't know Bob, and when, whatever campsite we were at, and it was time to pack up and jump in the canoe and move on, people would say, "Where's Bob?" Steve and I knew where he was. He was just wandering in the woods. Various different types of conifers that were different than the ones here. And just that love of the minutiae of wilderness and love of nature. That's what I thank Bob for. Thank you, Bob.
Hello, I'm one of the Geezer bachelors that was mentioned. And I want to tell a very quick story about the kayak. So we were on a canoe camping trip, kayak camping trip. And, was that Long Lake, John? Anyway, so Bob was not a swimmer, and but he went on this trip, and he took, he had more stable kayak. We made it across a very windy, kind of white cap lake. Got to our campsite, we put up the tents, wanted to go out for a little trip around. And someone else had a more stable kayak, and Bob asked me, he said, "How's that other kayak? Is it stable?" And, "Sure, it's not quite working." It's stable enough, Bob. He gets out there and he's doing fine. And comes back, he lands, and I didn't quite see him. He was getting out of the kayak and I heard this big splash. And I thought, oh shit. So he comes back, he comes up a minute later and he says, "You trying to kill me? That kayak is not stable." "Kayak, Bob, you're just fine." And I look at him, I'm expecting him to be wet, and he's defying physics or something. He was dry as could be. I said, "Bob, I heard a splash. I assumed it was you." And to this day, I don't quite know how he
Go ahead, please.
Hello. I've known Bob Rausch for just about 20 years. I'm also, we all know he was Robert John. I'm Joseph Robert. Last name is Pipel. And I've always gone by my middle name. When I met him and he essentially became part of the family, it was kind of interesting at the dinner table, which Bob were you talking about. So I'd just like to say a few things about some commonalities and something I really appreciated about the man. He chose as a partner my sister-in-law, who was 7.5 years older than him. I chose as a wife Anne, Barbara's sister, who's 7.5 years older than me. Interesting. Bob had a sister named, a sister named Carol, right? Who's about 4 years older than him. I have a sister named Carolyn, who's oftentimes called Carol, who's 4 years older than me. Interesting. His sister was a librarian, medical librarian, as I understand it. My sister was a medical secretary. And it goes on and on and on. Interesting coincidences in this business of life. He was a phlebotomist for 2 years when he was in the Army. For many years now, I've been as a volunteer, I've been an advanced life support emergency medical technician. So I too got to stick people and continue to stick people. So he and I could chat about those difficult starts, and not everybody has good veins. I'm sure he was way better than me, because he probably did 20, 30 sticks a day, 5 days a week. I do 20, 30, maybe 40 sticks a year. But I could tease him about the fact that I had to do it in a moving ambulance. It makes life a whole lot more interesting. But the really strong connection between Robert John Rausch and myself is the fact that he was a scientist, first and foremost. Yes, he called himself a forester, but he practiced his science of biology as a forester. And I too am a scientist. I am a chemist and an academic, so our approaches were somewhat different. But clearly from what people are saying here, he was a teacher. So we were both teachers. And I think that was created a good bond between the two of us. And what I really liked about him is that his field was biology, but he really expanded way out beyond that. We could talk biology, we could talk chemistry, we could talk physics. It was so wonderful to have, when I come here, which I do a few times a year to Monterey. It really was wonderful to talk science with him. We could talk about relativity. We could talk, that's getting into physics, but we could do it. So we could talk about relativity. We could talk quantum mechanics. We could even talk about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and all that that implies. Hopefully you've heard of that. If not, you've got something to go read about tonight. So I will miss the man. I've missed the 20 years that he and I have been together, and really appreciate that I had that opportunity.
Over 70 years ago, I was taking a college English course, and I encountered a poem with which I fell in love. It wasn't really until I met Bob Rausch at Gould Farm that I understood why. The poem combines an embrace of the infinite variety of life, and in that infinite variety, a steadfast core. Bob brought them to Gould Farm and found them here at Gould Farm. And I would like to read to you today that poem by William Butler Yeats called The Wild Swans at Cool. The trees are in their autumn beauty. The woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water among the stones are 59 swans. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished all suddenly mount and scatter, wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. I have looked upon these brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight, the first time on this shore, the bell beat of their wings above my head. I trod with a lighter tread. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddled in the cold, companionable streams, or climbed the air their hearts have not grown old. Companionable streams, passion or conquest, wander where they will, attend upon them still. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious, beautiful. Among what rushes will they build? By what lake's edge or pool delight men's eyes when I awake someday to find they have flown away?
Hello everyone, my name is Peter Wires and I met Bob Rausch in 2003 for the year and a half while I was here, and I knew him since then, and I was metal detecting and he took me all around, and it's like Bob was someone who taught me a lot about what it meant to have a good work ethic and to be a good person. And I have a poem here I'd like to read in his honor. It's called The Trees. There is unrest in the forest. There is trouble with the trees. For the maples want more sunlight, and the oaks ignore their pleas. The trouble with the maples, and they're quite convinced they're right. They say the oaks are just too lofty, and they grab up all the light. But the oaks can't help their feelings if they like the way they're made. And they wonder why the maples can't be happy in their shade. There is trouble in the forest, and the creatures all have fled, as the maples scream oppression, and the oaks just shake their heads. So the maples formed a union and demanded equal rights. The oaks are just too greedy. We will make them give us light. Now there's no more oak oppression, for they passed a noble law, and the trees are all kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw.
As many of us know, Bob was a professional forester. He was a steward of Gould Farm's extensive woodlands. As an ethical and a trained scientist, he held the farm to high standards. He loved learning new scientific discoveries and always took note of tree communication. For example, one grove of trees can detect a fungal infection such as black spot. They drop their leaves simultaneously through the grove through chemical signals one to another. So he believed trees also accurately indicated and invited human activity. Every late March and early April, Bob and I would be driving along Route 23 into Great Barrington, and he would always slow down at one area of Route 23, and he would crane his neck and look carefully at one specific, very large tree. So the first year we were together, as you can imagine, I was puzzled but polite. What was he doing? Well, So it turns out that that tree was a sign for him. If the leaves on the tree were budding out in very early spring, it was time to start tapping sugar maples at Gould Farm. And it wasn't just 1 year, but consecutive almost. And he was right. So I know from Bob that that tree is called a cut-leaf maple. Well, now I've learned there are 25 varieties of cut-leaf. Known to some people as a Japanese maple. So unlike most varieties of cut-leaf maple, they're usually very short, graceful, bright red, beautiful trees. This tree is enormous, but it's graceful, as you could expect of a maple. And there are threads of meaning toward understanding what's going on within Japanese forestry, particularly in the concept of shin-rin-yoku. And it's incorrectly translated as forest bathing. Actually, in English, a translation of the three characters refers to newly emergent wellness or betterment. So I will be working with the Gould Farm Landscaping Committee to bring a copy of this tree and its role to the farm to honor Bob and the maple tapping session. After identifying the variety and starting to plant, you'll see how many saplings are going to be needed. And look into propagation from the original tree if possible. And if somebody knows how I can grab the seeds on the highway, people wondering what I'm up to. Well, maybe you'll visit me in the county jail. In the future, we will have a planting ceremony when we've solved which one of the 25. At least we know that they have large cut-leaf maples, very tall, 35 feet or so, and 30 feet wide, which comes close to this. They have those in Washington State and Oregon. Why we've got one in the Berkshires is another puzzle for Mr. Rausch. And I think you'll agree that this is a very worthy exercise for Gould Farm to undertake.
I'm here for Bob, obviously, but I have some people in my life, some stubborn men like Abe Klein, David Richardson, that couldn't be here, that thought it was good to make me come and express some things for them and us. And first off, as a guest in your, whatever age you come in here, landing and going into F&G with Bob and that whole machine at that time, and still a machine I'm sure at this time, that operates quite amazingly, was exactly where you needed to be. Because at that time, and I really don't know what's happening now, I haven't been back for some time, but you could have some tea, you could go out on a hike at any time, and that's where I really learned to chop wood and carry water. For real, no, literally. And to this day, I think prouder than being a mother and having the good fortune I've had in my life is that I came in second in the wood splitting contest after Bob. I could really do that. But now at 54, not so much. So Bob was a teacher, and the bit that's been spoken to about him and children is really what I want to speak to. And he was the reason I became a teacher and stayed one up until my retirement of 25 years. And he called me recently, about, I guess, a month and a half or 2 months ago, and I didn't know at the time he was calling to say goodbye. And yeah, I was kind of thrown off. And he said, I need to know if you're still teaching. That's the first thing I need to know. And I said, no, I can't teach the way you know teaching once was, and not publicly anyways. And he said, well, you're working with children. I said, I actually am. I'm a licensed social worker with children. And he said, now I need to know about your daughter. Is she okay? I said, yeah, she's 5'9". She's well over my height and growing. And he said, I need to know one more thing. What are you going to do with Abe? And I said, he'll be fine. He's with me. And then the last thing I was going to ask, because we had a running joke for so many years, and I thought it was just my joke that Bob knew nothing about. It was between me and myself and I. And I would always ask Bob, and I didn't think he got it at all. It was my own little interior Muppet joke and saying, Bob, I need to know who works the eyebrows and the mustache at the same time. How many puppeteers does it take? And he would just look at me and smile. And on that day when he called me, he said, I'm going to answer a question you've asked me for decades. No, I'm not kidding. You can't make this stuff up. He said it takes 2 men on each eyebrow and 4 to do the mustache. So, there are certain people when you would come back to the farm over the decades that remained working here, and you'd see Roma, you'd see Bob, you'd see the you'd see Steve. Those are the ones that were still here, and if they had the others where you'd see them too, and now there'll be always more to see. I just thank you, Bob. Thank you. And Barbara, thank you.
We're going to turn to our Zoom folks to see if, I think we have a few folks who would like to share some remarks. So just give us 1 second to do our
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny. I was a guest at Gould Farm for 11 months in 2001 and 2012. I spent 6 of those 11 months on forestry and grounds, primarily because of Bob and Steve. Bob and I shared in our interest in the philosophy, and the interest in the philosophy of Alan Watts, who always stressed the inseparability of man and nature. And I learned a lot about nature when I was at Gould Farm, being a city guy. I remember playing softball with Bob on the field by the harvest barn, and he finally, I will always remember, almost 3 months after baseball season was over, Bob would, without exception, still remind us all very important that the Cardinals had won the World Series. I will always remember Bob as a kind, gentle soul, and someone I could truly be proud of cross paths with. Thanks for everything he's listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. If we could, online, we would go to Colleen this time. Colleen, please unmute.
Yes. I just wanted to say that I know Bob in a slightly different way, because I knew him, I think, first when he lived on Hoop by Wood Circle. I'm on Hoop by Road, just one house from Hoop by Wood Circle. And I would often walk that road, and I could see Bob's house, especially during the winter time through the trees. So I agree with everyone in their lovely comments about Bob, and I want to say that all of those qualities also made him a very, very fine neighbor. It makes me a little emotional thinking about it. Even though I didn't know Bob terribly well, I always knew he was there as a wonderful neighbor. And I think if I'd been consulted when I was so disturbed when he sold the house, and I still refer to it as Bob's house and miss the times when he was there and his lights were on. If someone had consulted me, I would have actually asked Barbara to move to Hoop. I would circle it, so that I would have two very fine neighbors. But in any case, I just wanted to say what a value a fine neighbor is, and may we all have such neighbors and work to be fine neighbors as well. That's it.
Let's see if we can go to Justin Chapman. Justin, it'd be great if you could turn on your video.
I think this is Justin. I think Ken's actually maybe me because of the. Anyway, I'll say Ken if that's you. Yeah, that's Ken.
Okay. Apologies. Yeah. Okay, Ken. Please go ahead, Ken. Ken, we're not getting any audio from you. Could you just double check your microphone? Yeah, I see that you unmuted yourself, but we still don't hear you.
If you're on your phone, press *6.
Okay, thanks for that. *6.
For that, sorry.
*6.
Yes,
how about
please go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, hi. What I want to say, someone's already likened Bob a bit to Brother Gould, or was reminded of Brother Gould and Brother Will, and that's my strongest memory of Bob is his serenity. I guess that's the best word. He just seemed to be at peace with himself and with the world, and I knew him since '78. I remember when he came to be interviewed to the farm, and I was happy to recommend him. He, a little bit of a character, but that was never an issue. But he just had a peace about him, and I imagine that's something that Brother Will had. A peace that, kind of came from a faith. Nothing that I've ever talked to Bob about, but that's what I remember most about. Just that, and I was one that was fortunate enough to visit him a few months before he left us. And we talked about death, and he had that peace, right? He wasn't worried about dying, and I'm very grateful to have had him in my life, and that serenity is something that I would like to have more of. So, thanks very much for giving me a chance to talk.
Rausch would like to share a few words. She doesn't have video, but here she is. Carol, if you could kindly unmute and share with the group. Carol, can you please go ahead? We don't hear you yet. If you're on your phone like Ken, just push *6 and we can hear you.
*6 was not how I got my audio. Well, I'm in my car, and I was getting the audio through the car radio, and I switched it over to the phone. So make sure it's your phone that's doing the audio. But in my case.
Carol, I'm afraid we're not hearing you just yet. All right, Carol writes in the text chat that she's having some difficulty. Carol, if you type a few sentences in the text chat, we'd be happy to read them out for you. it would mean so much to hear from Carol. Carol types, she says, "Thank you to everyone for coming together." That's what she's written in the text chat here on Zoom. Carol, it's our honor to be here. Thank you for joining us as well.
So all things bright and beautiful you guys have in the program. Lizanne asked me about 5 days ago. I thought somebody else was going to play this, so I quickly Googled, because like many of you, you probably vaguely know it, but how exactly does it go? And I found out there's several versions. So I'm going to play just the melody of the chorus that I have.
Was that he wanted to make sure that all faith traditions were lifted up in his memorial service. So today I'm going to read this called The Three Treasures. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of your way, enlighten and awaken in ourselves our supreme will. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of thy doctrine and get wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangra. May we all together become units in true accord in your life of harmony, in a spirit of universal brotherhood, free from the bondage of selfishness. Amen.
Bob went on from leading hikes here to leading hikes for the congregation of the Unitarian Universalists, which he attended every week for many, many years. And that piece that you heard earlier that he wrote was for the meditation manual we put together. And next to it was one called Gratitude, which I'm going to skip because we're time. But I just want to read you one line because Gretchen Dix, in writing for that, also referred to Bob Rausch, and it's right next to his. She was talking about all these things she was grateful for: to walk a woodland trail created with the helping hands of friends. I happen to know she walked many trails with Bob leading, including Gould Farm trails, and Bob helped her create trails on her own property in Alfred. So very cool. Bob lives in both meditations. May we be granted strength, wisdom, and thanksgiving. Strength to bear this loss. Wisdom to find meaning and purpose and the design of life. And thanksgiving for a life that touched our lives and helped create our common world. We ask this in the name of the Spirit of love, blessings, and peace to all. And I will extinguish this lovely candle. And but as I do it, I want to invite you to, we use flame as symbol, to take into your hearts, your minds, your actions, some of that flame of Bob that made life for him what it is, that keeping that alive, taking that flame into us from our dear loved Bob, helps his spirit to go on and on. Bless you.
God has given us power to create beauty, to make another smile, to be a healing presence in someone's sorrow, to bring justice to the oppressed, to console those in difficulty, to bring peace and joy to others, to help those in need, to laugh and enjoy life, to do goodwill and turn from evil, to forgive those who have hurt us, and most of all, to love.